Who makes films? It's a question that seems to have an obvious answer. Filmmakers. And who are filmmakers? Directors. Films even tell us this with something called the possessory credit, which usually comes in one of three forms that you've all seen before. This credit has not always belonged to directors. In the studio system era, films were usually credited to their producers or to studio heads. For example, if you look at Gone with the Wind, you can see that Selznick wants you to know very clearly whose film this is. These are three of the first four frames. The story of the transition from considering film a producer's art to a director's art has many facets, but one of the most important ones is the rise of the auteur concept in the late 50s, which posited that anything distinctive about a film comes from its director. One of the things that I find interesting about this is that the early critics who are articulating this idea tend to talk about three aspects of film: camera placement and movement, editing, and mise-en-scène. The director oversees all of these things, but there's also three distinct roles that are in charge of them, which are the cinematographer, the editor, and the production designer, as well as the rest of the cast and crew who collaborate together to make a film. If you've ever visited a film set or stumbled upon one in Dublin, you know how many people and how much effort it takes to make a film. So everyone knows it's a collaborative art, but film critics and scholars continue today to attribute most things that are distinctive about a film to its director. But you can look at other people as well, like cinematographer Gordon Willis, who worked with a lot of different directors in the 1970s, but across his body of work persists a distinct visual style regardless of the director that he works with. And trying to ascertain which crew members contribute artistically to a film and its final outcome and meaning is called multiple authorship, which, as it says, attributes or argues that anyone involved in the filmmaking who has an outcome on it or plays a role in its final outcome is one of its authors. So I write about 1970s Hollywood, which is considered a director's era. Most of the directors are men, but the decade saw an influx of talented women as well. And it's very hard to find a film from the 70s that doesn't have at least one woman in a key creative position. And currently I'm researching production designer Platt, and in addition to design, she wrote, she produced, she did costume design from the late 60s through the 90s. And her history and her marginalization within film history is fascinating, but I've been concentrating on two areas of her design. First is her strict attention to detail, which I argue changed the way Hollywood does design and ushered in a new approach. And also the way her design contributes to narrative and character development within her films. So Platt worked on a wide array of films with different directors, and across this body of work you can look at things like her use of color, lighting, her construction of sets, her costume design, her location scouting, and find a consistent approach that also consistently contributes to the look, feel, and meaning of her films. So, in tracing the contribution of these women to the 1970s, one of the things I'm trying to argue is that by concentrating almost solely on the director, we've recorded a history with huge gaps in our understanding of what creative labor is. And that allows Hollywood to continue to hire talented men and to continue to denigrate the work of talented women, despite what they sometimes say about parody. So across all sectors of Hollywood, we find that despite their talent and contributions, women are hired less frequently than men. You've read about this a lot recently. Women direct fewer films. They're given fewer opportunities to shoot, to score, to write films. They're hired less frequently for speaking roles in films. And this is true in television just as much as it is in the film industry. And much of this situation, I think, comes from the way that we have recorded history. So, in conclusion, I'd just like to say that women make films, and women have been making films since the earliest days of Hollywood. But as long as scholars and historians and the Hollywood industry itself continue to marginalize and minimize the creative contributions of women, it will continue to remain all too easy for Hollywood to deny or limit women's access to filmmaking. Thank you.